Good evening. I'm Jabari Morris, and this is MMT Mondays. Tonight, we're going to discuss how stupid the debt ceiling is. Really, it's just another way to block progressive policies. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and let's get to it. Here's how stupid the debt ceiling is. Even Chuck Todd of MSNBC was willing to serve up this softball of a question so that our favorite MMT-aware congressman, John Yarmuth, can knock it completely out the park.
Since this debt ceiling is a made-up issue, a made-up problem, would you prefer to see President Biden just unilaterally mint the coin, as they say, do it with an executive authority and test it that way at this point? I mean, this entire debt ceiling thing, I think the public rolls their eyes. It's obviously nothing that's taken very seriously anyway. So what's the point of it? Mint the coin, right?
There is no point to it. We're the only country in the world that has a debt ceiling that operates this way. We've raised it nearly 100 times since it was put into effect 100 years ago. And it hasn't had any impact on the debt.
Stephanie Kelton sings the praises of Representative Yarmuth, as well as informing us of the truth about the knowledge of MMT among politicians in Washington. After years of listening to economists, CBO directors, fellow lawmakers, and others warn of an impending debt crisis, Yarmuth began to notice that reality kept evading the tales of doom and destruction. Years later, with an already fertile mind, the congressman's son introduced him to MMT. You can listen to them talk about their journey to MMT in this recent podcast. Based on my own interactions with lawmakers on the Hill, I would estimate that roughly 1/3 of Congress is not MMT conversant. By that, I mean that they could articulate, in very general terms, that the federal government is the insurer of the currency, that its budget is not constrained like that of a household or a private business, and that inflation, not solvency, is the relevant constraint on spending. Rohan Gray of Williamette University and Philip Diehl, former director of the U.S. Mint, explained the political theater of the debt ceiling and how mint the coin eliminates that.
And you can see a clear parallel with the debt ceiling today, where everybody knows it needs to be increased or abolished, but nobody wants to take political responsibility. And so for the executive branch to step into the breach and say, look, we're going to do what everybody knows needs to be done, but maybe politically unpalatable. And that might be to use authority that you've clearly given us, in ways that maybe you want to be able to say, hey, we didn't want this. And that's useful political theater because you can distance yourself a little bit, but it allows us to keep doing what needs to be done.
And that is part of the magic of the $1 trillion coin, is it depoliticizes the whole issue. After you bite the bullet or bite the coin and do it, it takes that issue out of the hands of Congress. Mm-hmm. Everybody is off the hook, and except, the Secretary of Treasury and the President. And actually, I think what happens right now, what is happening is the $1 trillion coin and also the 14th Amendment serve as a fail-safe on the coin. So everybody can play games with the politics of this, knowing that in the end that there are outs to this, and to sort of settle markets down as they pretend to approach this disaster of the economic collapse of default. And I think that's part of what has happened this week when all of a sudden, Senator McConnell decides that, let's put this off because there were escape hatches. There were other things that were going on too, like, the Department of Defense intervened.
We need to keep the lights on. This is a national security issue.
Pay our people. Yeah. And so there were other things at play too, but the timing of the article that was written by Felix Salmon that said that quoted me saying, "Oh, the Treasury Department
Could be done in hours.
Yeah, can produce this coin overnight virtually if they set up a couple of ducks in order." And that's the first time I don't think that had ever been said.
No, it hadn't.
And it got tremendous play. Of course, as you know, Drudge put it at the top of their page and front page, and then gave a spin to the title that suggested it was
They're going to do it. Yeah,
they're doing it right now. So
their hyperbole helped bring it further into reality. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It certainly blew up the whole story.
Yeah, and I want to just take a step back also, because we were just talking about, taking this out, depoliticizing this. But of course, this isn't about depoliticizing the budget itself. This isn't about depoliticizing spending itself. That's still an incredibly political process. In fact, maybe the central political process for Congress. This is just about honoring that spending once it's already been committed, and not saying we're going to ignore Congress or we're going to go back on our debts and things. And
in his final clip, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, explains to President Biden the dangers of this false dilemma.
I see old buddy Jamie Dimon up there at JP Morgan. Why, from your perspective, do we need to raise the debt limit immediately before October 18th?
Mr. President. Anyway, there are 5 quick points I want to make. Number 1 is really a morality point. We all teach our children that we're supposed to meet our obligations. I don't think the nation should be any different. Number 2, we should never even get this close. There are huge economic costs already being borne by companies and lawyers trying to figure out what this means if something like this ever happens. It's already affecting the stock market, et cetera, as you've heard from some of the folks here. Number 3, we should get rid of the debt ceiling. We don't need to have this kind of brinksmanship every couple of years. Number 4, an actual default. An actual default would be unprecedented. The things we know that it would do are very bad, and it could be potentially far worse. The effects would be cascading. So day 1 would be bad, but the cascading effects in the ensuing weeks could go anywhere from a recession to a complete catastrophe for the global economy. And I don't know why anyone would take a chance like that. And number 5, America's role in the world is essential. We are the bedrock. The American Treasury is the bedrock. Our credibility, we're being watched right now by our allies and unfortunately our enemies. Our credibility is absolutely essential. Trust in America and the U.S. dollar and the financial system is critical to the world economy and eventually actually world peace. So this is a time I think we should show American competence, not American incompetence.
As we see, even business leaders see the ridiculousness of the debt ceiling and how it is the actual danger, not mint the coin. Instead of allowing false constraints to rule the narrative, we all need to learn the truth so that bad actors in Congress cannot bring the currency issuing U.S. federal government to a halt over a lie.
And yeah, I've described it as the putting a gun to the head of the American economy and saying, we'll pull the trigger if they don't come to the table. And, even if they're being unreasonable by not coming to the table, the fact that you're putting a gun to the head of the American economy is its own form of kind of degradation of the process and what the public understands, because you're telling them something that isn't true to achieve an outcome. And in doing so, eroding that trust in government and in the fact that your politicians are telling you what's actually going on. And they're doing so in a way that's playing with fire that if it gets burnt, will affect everybody. And we will all go, I can't believe this happened,
Yes, yeah. And I think in the past, when it came up in 2011, 2013, this became increasingly difficult to believe but I mean, there are some who believed, and some very smart people, savvy people who believed that this was only traditional politics, using leverage in a negotiating situation to get an advantage over your opponents. I think we've increasingly come to realize, not just because of previous debt limit fights, but from other political situations, that there are people in the country who believe that they benefit in terms of power and political position by damaging the economy of the country when the opposing party will be held accountable for it. And it's a form of economic sabotage. And there is still a group of people who would benefit from that, and or who could sustain their position for a period of time in those circumstances. But the vast majority of us would be losers.
And we saw that almost with some of the people motivated behind Brexit, for example. They might have been quite aware of how damaging it could be to that economy, but they didn't care.
If you enjoyed tonight's video, make sure to check out realprogressive.org and subscribe to get notifications on new video streams in YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, Facebook, and Rockfin. And don't forget to smash the like button. Thank you, and continue learning.